Yeah. Okay. Better. Okay. Again, good evening to everyone and to our delegates and our viewers, of course, who are tuning in on Facebook. And I am grateful to be part of this year's Philippine-Korean Youth Forum and present a keynote lecture in the Arts and Media track. With that, I would like to extend again my appreciation to the organizers of the forum, especially to UP Arirang, and for the invitation and to all our sponsors here in this event. My keynote lecture this evening centers on both Korean and Filipino music. Allow me to use the term Filipino in referring to Filipino with a capital P, Pinor, Pinoy, or Philippine to avoid confusion. But beyond the music itself, I think it is essential that we include and examine both culture's industry and fandom as part of the discussion. How the two popular cultures, Korean and Filipino, are related in the dialogue of globalization, transnationalism, and localization. From this perspective, I tried to title my lecture From Globalization to Localization: The Influence of K-pop on P-pop industry, music industry and fandom. As a budding historian, my primary specialization, in fact, is on the history, on the idea of nationalism in Southeast Asia. However, my growing interest in studying nations and popular cultures in the age of globalization has drawn me to questions that seem worth asking ourselves nowadays. One of those questions is about the considerable influence and success of K pop in Southeast Asia, especially in the Philippines. As a millennial born in the mid 1990s, I was part of the generation who was first exposed to the two edged gifts of globalization. For instance, internet connectivity that made other nations' popular culture more accessible. To share with you, I remember I was in my second year of high school in 2009 when Girls' Generation G and Genie went viral in the Philippines thanks to the increasing access of middle class households to DSL internet and to the birth of YouTube. The same year, Nobody by Wonder Girls, though released a year before in 2008, became a national anthem of local jeepneys and fast food chains. It took a year before K-pop became a staple of local radio shows and music television channels like Mix and MTV Philippines. It was the beginning of the Hallyu in the country, and the rest was history. In 2019, 10 years since G and the Nobody craze, a dance video uploaded on YouTube went viral. Filipino K-pop fans on Facebook and Twitter were exchanging positive remarks about a dance practice video of a Filipino pop group called SB19. What's interesting in SB19's video is the use of K-pop elements familiar to fans or stans. A dance video with a white background, synchronization of the members, and the smooth dance positioning, except that the lyrics of the pop song titled Go Up are in the vernacular Filipino language. According to press releases and news, SB19 is an all Filipino K pop inspired boy group whose members trained in South Korea. Like K pop groups managed under the entertainment company, SB19 is managed under a local branch of Korean entertainment company called Show BT. SB19 not only started a trend, but also gave birth to a new branch or let's say subdivision of Filipino pop music in the Philippines. But of course, the rise of P-pop cannot escape the negative statements among Filipinos. In the last 2 years, we have witnessed negative assertions about P-pop. This gives us the main problem, whether this new Filipino pop is copying Korean pop music. May it be yes or no? I argue in this lecture that by tracing the historical roots of K-pop music, we can find similarities to what P-pop is facing today. thus provide more clarity concerning our main problem. To guide us in this conversation, I have raised the following sub-questions. What are the historical, cultural, and theoretical origins of K-pop and P-pop? I believe that it takes a good understanding of histories and cultures to avoid grave misunderstandings of the present. How similar is P-pop to K-pop in terms of music, industry, and fandom? What is the future of P-pop in, let's say, copying K-pop? As a Filipino, I also hope to give out learning suggestions about the rise of P-pop based on the success of K-pop music and industry and fandom. Perhaps most of the contents of this lecture are common knowledge to our delegates and audience, especially to those already very familiar with K-pop and P-pop. But I hope that after this lecture and during the discussion later, we have a better understanding of the two cultures and welcome the possibility of opening new avenues of discourse about the two cultures. Take note, however, that in our discussion of K-pop and P-pop, I am pertaining to the latter and the former's association with idol culture. Historically, the foundation and development of K-pop music and culture in general are attributed to the prevalent impact of Western cultural imperialism. Theoretically speaking, Dobo Shim argued that the hegemonic influence of the West, particularly American, subjugated smaller nations like South Korea, from the consumption of media to the universalization of capitalism. Take, for example, South Korea and the Philippines within the Cold War context. Both were under the sphere of political, economic, and cultural influence of the United States. South Korea, however, used such suppression to their advantage and produced something of its own. Simply, globalization, particularly in the realm of popular culture, breeds a creative form of hybridization that works towards sustaining local identities in the global context. K-pop is precisely large in terms of definition, periodization, and context. Musically, modern K-pop had its beginnings in the early 1990s, during the rise of boy band Soteji and the Boys. The said group changed the landscape of music and performance showcases in South Korea. The group brought innovations that challenged the ruling musical styles, song topics, fashion, and censorship in Korean music. Idol culture, however, was only introduced in the late 1990s and the early 2000s when K-pop, say, was institutionalized and standardized by entertainment agencies. These agencies and companies recruited and trained potential performer called idols. These idols were put together in groups based on individual and collective qualities. The K-pop industry, together with the government support, took advantage of the growing economies of China and Japan before it was exported to Southeast Asia. Though late compared to China and Japan, K-pop's expansion in Southeast Asia was successful because of familiarity with Korean television dramas. In the Philippines, for instance, Filipino local television channels acquired K-dramas and dubbed them into Tagalog language. These K-dramas were put in primetime slots in the afternoon. Of all the factors that made K-pop successful in its exportation, the internet provided to be the primary motivator for its success in the Philippines. K-pop music, industry, and fandom cultures evolve throughout the years. Musically, K-pop has now adopted musical elements from Europop, American hip hop, Japanese city pop, heavy metal, and even the use of traditional South Asian sounds, and among others. Beyond the music and performances, K-pop idols are active in various industries like modeling and acting. From local to international brands, there was a shift from acclaimed Hollywood actors to K-pop idols as endorsers. But the popularity and success of K-pop music industry should be credited to fandom culture. As the main consumers of K-pop, various industries concerned strategize and adjust accordingly to its demand to satisfy its fans or stans. As of today, K-pop in general continues to evolve based on technological advancements, expanding the reach of K-pop music industry and fandom. A mix of many free and subscription contents like online concerts, reality and variety shows, paid fan club memberships, fan cafes and forums, institutionalized video and photo fan cams, and artist to fan communications, among others, satisfying its fans or stands or what we call the consumers. Now, let's talk about Filipino pop music or P-pop. As I mentioned earlier, the post-independence era of South Korea and the Philippines was closely the same in terms of popular culture progression. Like South Korea, the Philippines gave in to the pressures of Western cultural domination. Here in the country, the Philippines have Western pop music artists or like equals to this Western pop music artists. To cite a few examples, we have a Bee Gees inspired group like the VST and Company. For soloists, the country has the Rick Astley of the Philippines, Mr. Roderick Paulate, often dubbed as the Beatles of the Philippines, the famous Eraserhead band. But musically speaking, their sound is more like the 1980s English rock band The Smiths. Although we often call it OPM, a genre we locally created, but by definition, it's really complicated. The question is, how do we measure its Filipino-ness or its originality to be Filipino? What are the parameters for something to be called OPM? And if it's only localized, this gives us the precursor of how K-pop will be influential in today's Filipino pop music. Filipino pop music entered a stage of stagnation from the early 2000s to the mid 2010s. That almost a decade, we acknowledge the prevalent Western music, dabbling it's either alternative rock, it's hip hop, and R&B. Interestingly, in 2008, the Filipino music industry, through giant entertainment companies, attempted to put up boy bands, recruiting some of Philippines' media rising stars. If you're very familiar with what we call Accelerate, that group, the attempt was a complete failure. First, the K-pop blueprint is still in its experimental stage and rise. Second, Filipinos were still focused on exploring K-pop at the time. Third is the lack of commitment from the giant entertainment companies here in the Philippines like Viva, GMA, and ABS-CBN. Today, P-pop is synonymous with K-pop. As I mentioned at the beginning of this lecture, a Filipino boy band named SB19 was founded by a South Korean company called Show BT. The said company saw the potential of localizing K-pop music in the Philippines because of Filipino fans' enthusiasm for K-pop for more than a decade now. Rather than following the South Korean company's strategy of recruiting Japanese, Chinese, even Thai and Indonesian trainees and members to localize K-pop, Show BT literally imported K-pop in our country. Although the earlier framework of SB19 is entirely K-pop in terms of music production and choreography, what sets them apart is the use of the vernacular or the Tagalog language. In a span of 2 to 3 years, more than 10 K-pop boy groups and girl groups actively exist in the country's music scene. As I have observed, these existing and upcoming P-pop groups started popping up like mushrooms. But allow me to focus only on two groups as case studies for this lecture, namely boy group SB19, and girl group KAIA. Both groups are under the same Korean-led entertainment company, Show BT, for the very reason that the said company was the first to import or successfully localize K-pop here in the Philippines by applying the K-pop blueprint to SB19 and KAIA. First, how is K-pop, P-pop in terms of music and choreography? Let's examine KAIA's pre-debut single, titled KAIA, with a Y. Listening and dissecting the said track, the melodies, the sound and the music record samplings, the structure, the way of singing, and even the style of rap singing of some verses are based on existing K-pop patterns. For instance, at first listen, the introductory sampling of Kaya has the exact sampling of a song by Sunmi. Surprisingly, according to reports, the song Kaya was produced by Lee Oh-won, a South Korean music producer who had worked with K-pop acts like Stray Kids and Chinese Taemin. Comparing Kaya to other P-pop girl groups' recent singles and performances, Kaya stands out because of two things: the use of familiar K-pop sounds and choreography. SB19, however, is setting new P-pop standards. Compared to their viral single Go Up, which is very pop, the recent song Bazinga is still pop but adopts new elements like hip hop and is more expressive and stronger. Like how BTS evolved from Blood, Sweat, and Tears to Dynamite, SB19 follows the same path. SB19, as the first successful P-pop group, needed to evolve and set more standards for future groups. But I believe, and based on the development of K-pop in recent years, new P-pop groups may continue following the K-pop blueprint, perfecting it, and by then it can set its standards. Apart from music, as I mentioned about the amount of content for fun consumption, SB19 and Kaya are investing in content production. Following the K-pop blueprint, you have dance practice videos, concept teasers, live performances, self-produced variety shows, vlogging, and more live singing performances, collaborations among others. To test if localizing K-pop blueprint here in the country is successful is to look for fans or stans engagement and patronization of P-pop groups. Surprisingly, SB19's popularity and success in the country are not limited to our borders. Through the help of social media platforms like Twitter and YouTube, SB19 was able to make noise regionally and globally. In April 2021, journalist Jeff Benjamin announced that SB19 was nominated at the 2021 Billboard Music Awards for Top Social Artist. SB19 was the first ever Filipino group to get a major nomination on a famous award show that most Asian artists aspire to. According to Benjamin, the nomination was a major moment for the country's music scene. The nomination would not be possible without the massive social media engagement done by SB19's fandom called Atin or 18. As of today, SB19 social media followers are less than 600,000. That's a tiny fragment compared to various K-pop groups. But looking at the nomination alone, it proves that fandoms are crucial in the K-pop and the P-pop's popularity and recognition. However, these efforts are not enough. Remember that the most significant lever for K-pop's globalization is the South Korean government's support for K-pop as part of various soft power waves. Likewise, the Philippine government should invest in and promote these industries. Now, we go back to our main question. Is P-pop copying K-pop? The answer is no. We must understand that cultures are dynamic, and that include popular cultures. P-pop, however, clearly adopted the K-pop blueprint. That's why SB19 and Kaya are gaining attention because they adopted this blueprint. But the use of the vernacular language or Filipino makes P-pop distinctive. In addition, we must also realize that both cultures, K-pop and P-pop, can coexist together. And to be honest with you, based on personal experience, I would not appreciate P-pop if not I were not an avid listener or a K-pop fan. My exposure and individual experience with K-pop music and various fandom cultures have made significant impact on the emergence of P-pop. The growing industries and fandoms of P-pop are something to look forward to. As a final note, not only as a concluding statement, perhaps also a great opportunity to propose some thoughts. If there were any observers from the P-pop industry in our viewers, for the benefit of our P-pop industry. The success of SB19 that it enjoys today is not based alone on their capacity to deliver great performances and their fans' blistering enthusiasm, but because of show BT's importerization or localization of K-pop blueprint in the country. Remember that Filipinos' familiarity with K-pop sounds and choreography became leverage for the initial virality of SB19's Go Up. According to London-based Filipino linguist Ruani Tupas, who has also done a great deal of study on P-pop, the use of local languages is certainly vital for Filipinos' patronization of P-pop. I think it's high time for our local televisions to and radios, for instance, to cater more P-pop content. I am not suggesting that we abandon our OPM and the other genres, but let's take advantage of P-pop's rising popularity. P-pop should go mainstream and expand various industries. As I mentioned earlier, it is not limited to music alone. And this is also based on Professor Capistrano's lecture. But we should answer the consumer's wish and demand. Like K-pop, an expansion of P-pop industries could provide more jobs, contribute to the economy, and bring on, this is no pun intended, but to bring on to the next level of Filipino music. And if you want to learn more about my initial findings on the relationship between K-pop in the Philippines and the question of nationalism, you can scan the QR code and this leads you to my publication, Asia Review of Seoul National University. And I hope everyone here who's really a fan of K-pop, let's give P-pop a try. Let's try to listen to P-pop and also support our own local industry. Again, thank you very much for listening. And I look forward to the questions later, to the comments from our delegates and audience in the Q&A. And salamat at mabuhay po tayong lahat.